Hello and welcome to the For the Love of Creatives podcast. I'm your host, Maddox. I'm here with Dwight. We're the connections and community guys. And today our guest is Teresa Coleman Wash. Welcome, Teresa. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I think I'll tell our listeners how we met because I think it's really, really important. We were must have been reading a newspaper or getting it was an email that came, but it was an event that was called RX
Racial healing.
Racial Healing Circle.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And we thought that sounded quite interesting. So we registered and we went. Come to find out, Teresa was one of the leaders of that. And it was a fascinating experience. We met some amazing people. But that was our way of meeting, and we just hit it off immediately.
Yeah, I think that was the first time we met face to face, but that wasn't the first time I think that you and Dwight were at the theater. Did you guys come to our production of Fanny?
We
We,
did.
That's
yes,
right.
we did. We'd
So
been in.
Liz Michael played Fannie Lou Hamer in our co-production with the Dallas Theater Center of The Music and Life of Fannie Lou Hamer. And I'm so glad that you came back to the RX Racial Healing Circle because it afforded us the opportunity to really get to know each other on a more intimate level. So
Yes, yes. And then you and I have gotten the lovely opportunity to meet for coffee. Well, for lunch one day. It was,
that's right.
can't wait to do it again. Well, let's start off. I'm going to give you an opportunity because I think you can do this better than we can to tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you're about. The Cliff Notes bio, and then we're going to get into the story.
Excellent. I'm happy to. So my name is Teresa Coleman Wash, and I chartered a nonprofit theater in Atlanta, Georgia, years ago, 30 years ago. Uh, it was an opportunity for us to bring quality theater to an area of the city that was not, afforded that opportunity. And so we were doing dinner theater performances there. And then I married my husband, moved to Dallas, and I told him, I said, I want to do this theater, try this theater thing full time and see what happens. And in Atlanta, I was selling broadcast advertising, I should say that, right? For the Disney family. So I was doing theater kind of at night. It was very much a hobby. But when I got married and moved to Dallas, I decided I wanted to make a career out of theater. I'd seen Diana Ross in The Wiz years ago, and it changed my life. I'm serious, it changed my life. So I mean, representation matters, right?
Mhm.
So Al was very, very supportive, and he said, "Okay, you can, let's try theater. Let's see what happens." Then in 2005, something interesting happened. One of our longtime patrons who had followed our progress called me up and said, I have a 10,000 square foot building that I want to donate to your nonprofit. Now, I will tell you that it was my husband's business partner, Arthur Primus. And Arthur and Al were, a lot of people may not know this, or a lot of people probably do. Arthur and Al were promoting Tyler Perry shows. It was when Tyler first started doing urban theater. And when my husband and I, um, when we were dating, he said, and I was living in Atlanta, he sent me to a Tyler Perry show to kind of scout and see who this Tyler guy was. And I'm like, oh God, yes, you deserve your time. Well, Al and Arthur were business partners. They promoted Tyler Perry shows. And so in 2005, they had this dilapidated photography studio on Tyler Street that they had bought. And Arthur saw what we were doing in Atlanta. He saw that we were working with particularly, students here in the Dallas area. And he said, I want to donate this property to your nonprofit. So we raised $1.2 million in private sector funding. We were able to get a construction loan for about $800,000. We started the renovations in 2005, completed the renovations in 2008, just as the economy plummeted. And but what we did was we held focus group meetings and we asked the community, what are we doing that you'd like to see us do more of? And what are we not doing that you'd like to see us implement? And what we learned was that parents wanted somewhere for their kids to be during the after school hours. The neighborhood wanted a jazz series, jazz concerts, and artists wanted somewhere to hone their craft. And so we began building programs based on the conversations that we were having with the community. So we were active listeners even back then. Guys, I will tell you, we have celebrated 30 years. I've led this organization through 9/11, 2008 economic downturn, and now a global pandemic. And one of our superpowers is being active listeners with the community. That's how we've been able to not only survive, but thrive even with everything that's going on. So I'm excited about that. I distinctly remember attending an art symposium back in 2008 when the economy plummeted. And it was at the Latino Cultural Center. And Michael Kaiser, who was the president of the Kennedy Center at that time, came to Dallas and he met with everybody, all of the artistic leaders. And what he said resonated with me deeply. And that is sick people don't get well by doing less. Now's the time to connect with community. So that's how those conversations came about. And so I'm really excited about the work that we're doing because I really feel like we're essential workers at the Bishop Arts Theater Center.
That's incredible. I mean, I knew part of this story, but not all of it. Um, wow. I'm just so blown away that I'm not sure where to go from here. Um, I guess what is the part of your creative journey that I mean, I had a question, but I think you may have kind of just a lead off question, but you may have just answered it. But what is the part of your journey as a creative that you most want to share and talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of mentioned it. I saw Dinah Ross in The Wiz years ago. And I remember, I mean, every pageant I was in, I sang Home from The Wiz, right? I knew I wanted to work in theater. When I was in Atlanta, there was a touring show coming through Atlanta with Jane Kennedy and her husband, um, Leon Isaac Kennedy. God is trying to tell you something. And they needed a choir. So I was singing in the church choir at that time, and the choir director said, this tour is coming through Atlanta, and I don't talk about this. I love this question. Thank you. But he said, it's coming through town, and you should really consider being a part of the choir. So I did. And every night I'd go on stage and I was part of the backup, one of the backup singers in that choir. And I just remember at the end of the run when they were getting ready to leave, I felt like, oh my God, I have found, you know, my purpose. I found what I want to do on this planet. And it was so transformative. And it was around the time again, that I was so enamored with Diana Ross. And I decided at that moment that I wanted a career in theater. And I think that's probably when I started chartered the theater back in Atlanta also. What's interesting, though, I will say, is that, I got in this business for purely selfish reasons because at that time, I was writing and producing all of the plays that you know, um, we were performing. But it's interesting now, what I do more than anything else is create opportunities for other artists. And I think that's why the theater has grown the way that it has, right? I had to surrender my will to the will of the community. And I think that is such a superpower. I wish more artists would, it really isn't about, I get a chance, we have complete autonomy to do whatever we want to do. The fact that we own a building and that I'm a Black woman in that space, right? It definitely has its challenges, but it is so incredibly rewarding because we get to do a lot of things that um, that perhaps a lot of people are afraid to do or just simply don't have the resources to do. And so I feel like I'm incredibly grateful to be in the space that I'm in.
You said something that I want to back up to for just a second. You talked about getting into it for, selfish reasons. And
Hmm.
now, all these years later, it's all about giving back to the community, helping
Hmm.
others have an opportunity. I think that's the way our process was intended to be. I think in the early years, when we're trying to figure out what we want to do and how we're going to do it, those are the lean years. And we pretty much have to be selfish. There's an element of survival going on in those early years. And when we're in survival mode, we can't think about anybody else but ourselves. But as you emerge from survival and you went through your process where it began to be fuller and more abundant, and it wasn't about survival anymore, it was now about thriving. I think that the beautiful part of what you're telling about your story is I don't think everybody goes to this stage where they realize it's time to give back. But I think that's perhaps the message of your at least right this moment, a big message in your story is at some point we need to give back.
Oh yeah.
We need to do, and that can look a lot of different ways. It doesn't mean that you still can't do your thing and thrive while you're giving back. It's just not all about you anymore. And we kind of live in an it's all about me world. So this is
Hmm.
a really big and important message, I think.
And in doing so, I feel like I found other things that I'm really good at. Like I'm really good at financial management. Just like in order to have a thriving business right now, you gotta have somebody on staff who can crunch the numbers, who knows the numbers, who are very can get very intimate with the numbers. Um, and I'm that person. I'm one of those people in in our organization. I also want to just say that I think is because I made a lot of mistakes, Maddox, when we first started. And one of the mistakes that I made is thinking that I could do it all by myself. You know, I didn't realize how incredibly important relationships are, right? And so now I have a team of people who not only have a genuine interest in the well being of the organization, they have a genuine interest in my well being. And so if I need to take a sabbatical, if I need to step away, if I need a career break, everybody knows when Teresa is healthy, the organization is healthy. And so we prioritize self care in our organization. And that's from the top down. So that's been a huge learning lesson. And I think that we are a better, stronger, more resilient organization because of that human um, component where we are looking at what's best for the individual.
I think a vast majority of companies in our nation could take a page out of your book. Wow. You know, when we had lunch that day, part of the story, because I asked, we talked about Dwight and I are avid theater goers. We're season subscribers to three different theaters in the city, and then we take in one-offs with other theaters. We're in the theater a lot. And I have been, he hasn't been as long, I have been for 25 years. Very much an avid theater goer. And I've watched the theater crowds diminish little by little by little. I've watched the crowds get older and the young people aren't coming in.
Mhm.
And when we had lunch, we talked about this, what's going to happen because it doesn't look promising. And I think this speaks to your creativity. I mean,
Mhm.
your creativity, because you looked at that, you realized that was happening. You could see it happening to theaters, not only in our city, but all over the nation. The crowds diminishing, along with it, the funds diminishing. And you got really, really creative and you did some pivoting. And so I would love for you to really expand on that part of the story about that creativity and how you figured out ways to bring people into the theater that were things no other theater was doing.
Yeah, yeah. The American theater is in an existential crisis. Everybody knows that. The National Endowment for the Arts is estimated that two to three theaters are closing a month, right?
A lot.
One of the things that we did back in 2008, again, I think that was so incredibly important that we were active listeners. That has to happen in this moment. I distinctly remember a philanthropic organization telling us when we first opened, maybe, a few years after we opened, that they would not fund us because theater was not the primary focus of, they felt, of our organization. We have still a very successful jazz series. And we all know music kind of overshadows theater. What's interesting in this moment is that um, music venues have recovered much faster than theaters um, due to COVID. And so I am so grateful for our jazz series because when we when we were, during COVID, we were very much not able um, to produce theater performances. But there were partners like the Dallas Zoo who invited us to their venue to kind of produce a jazz under the stars. And that has kind of taken off. Our Jazzy subscribers loved it. We've been at the Dallas Zoo ever since then. And so, that's one of the programs that kind of was birthed out of uh, the pandemic and still continues. And it goes back to what you were saying about how we've really had to be incredibly creative, but also it speaks to the strength of our relationships. I don't care what organization you're with, the strength of your organization is going to be based on the strength of your relationships. And so we figured out very, very quickly that we had to make sure that, I'm not sitting at that desk, that I'm in the community talking to people, cultivating relationships, not just in Dallas. Also, I'm getting ready to get on the plane tonight to go to New York because we have partners in New York. There are things that we're working on in New York. The other thing I think that the American theater has not done well is embrace technology. It is here. It is not going anywhere. We have to embrace it and find ways for our organizations to coexist using technology. So I'm excited about some upcoming things that are happening that we're launching the latter part of this year. And the other thing is we finally, I believe, have the staff to do all of the things that we're contemplating, that we've been planning on doing. One of the books that I've reread is Good to Great by Jim Collins. Jim talks about how incredibly difficult it is to build the right team. You can't even talk strategy until you have the right people on the bus. And so I feel like we're kind of turning a curve, even with everything that's happening in the world right now. I feel like it's really important that I'm really excited about, some of the things that we're launching the latter part of the year or the mid-year.
Uh, I'd like to pull on a thread that we've kind of talked about at different points, and you're kind of hinting at. But when you were talking about the ways that you'd gone on that arc from pursuing your own dream to giving back, I know that there's a lot that's going on. The theater is a community hub. Could
Mhm.
you share some of the wonderful things that are happening that the theater is helping bring into being?
Yeah, yeah, I'm happy to do that. So, prior to COVID, senior citizens were coming to the theater to participate in a storytelling circle on our stage. Of course, when COVID happened, they couldn't come. So I told our board of directors, we're going to them. If they can't come to us, we're not going to abandon them in this moment. We are going to them. So we started this program called Patio Live, where we would hire artists and performers to go to aging care facilities and perform in patios and parking lots of those facilities. And every Friday, even now, um, you will see, if you go to our Instagram page, that uh, we have partnerships with those aging care facilities. Many of the aging care facilities, some of the residents have dementia. And what we're finding is that through music therapy, been a decrease in medication for some of the residents. There's an increase in socialization skills. So, I know power of the arts. The other thing that we do is every year for the past 14 years, we have been offering a summer theater camp. We have 50 kids in the building. It's an 8-week program, Monday through Thursday from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. We serve breakfast, lunch, and snacks. Those kids work with master teaching artists and music, art, dance, theater, and life skills. So we have life skills partners like um, the City of Dallas Office of Environmental Quality has a very user-friendly, a kid-friendly program where they teach how to be how to be environmentally friendly workshops. We also the Dallas Zoo or the Dallas Public Safety, Dallas Police Department. They do how to be, safety, fire and safety drills. Um, we also have people like Texas A&M AgriLife who will come by and do healthy nutrition classes for our summer theater camp students. And who have several other life skills partners. But at the end of that 8 weeks, there's a culminating performance, there's a showcase. So the parents can see what their kids have learned during that 8-week program. And so that has been happening for the past 14 years. And I'm so excited that we're able to do that. Inevitably, we have a waiting list because we're only able to serve 50 students. We're trying to figure out a way to serve more students in our building. We do have also summer theater camp programs at other districts. We've worked with DeSoto ISD in the past, as well as Lancaster ISD. So we've been able to find a way to serve more students outside of our building. But that happens also. And then you guys mentioned the RX Racial Healing Circles. I study with Dr. Gail Christopher with the National Collaborative of Health Equity. And I think it's really important for us, especially in this moment, to see people who don't look like us to have really hard conversations. I will say that. To have really hard conversations with people who don't look like us and sit in discomfort. And so that's what those, I mean, you were a part of that. That's what those racial healing circles were about. So
Yeah, we thought it was
again,
amazing.
thank you. I appreciate that. And we've seen some really magical things happen in those healing circles. We just did one on Dr. King's birthday, so
Oh,
with Stephanie Tovar, and there are some healing circles. Stephanie Tovar will be facilitating some stories that heal series, starting, I believe the first one starts in March or April. But we are excited about that. So, that's on our website and for information for anyone who wants to be a part of that.
it's very apparent to me. You may have never ever thought of this, but if you ever get weary of what you're doing, you would absolutely make a phenomenal freelance consultant for the arts.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. I mean, I'm working with, interestingly enough, I was contacted by Theater Communications Group to join their board. I mentioned that the American theater is in an existential crisis. And so we're all thinking about, dismantling what that the system that has not served any of us, and really thinking about what do we want to build? How can we build a model that is sustainable where we're not um, constantly or solely dependent on public sector funds, public sector grants. It just very well may go away. I I've considered it. And so that's some of the work that I'm going to be doing at the national level with Theater Communications Group. And I'm excited about that because I get to learn also. There are a lot of very smart people in that room, and I like being in a room with smart people because I get to learn.
Well, you are definitely one of those smart people. I knew that the
Absolutely.
minute I met you. And at the same time, you're so down to earth and so warm and friendly. I just felt such a connection with you the minute we interacted. I was just
You
like,
know what?
she is my people.
Mhm.
But Maddox, I felt the same way the minute you opened your mouth and introduced yourself at that racial healing circle. I'm like, okay, that's my people. Yeah. I knew I would, I'm glad that we made a beeline to each other after
Yes,
that.
yes. I would love to figure out a way where we could be perhaps more involved in each other's.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Well, let's talk about maybe, we've talked about lots of successes and lots of fabulous creativity and ideas. Let's talk about maybe some of the challenges, some of the things that you had to go through to get where you are now. Maybe a dark time or two and how you navigated that.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question because I mentioned the 2008 economic downturn. The other thing that was happening in Dallas was the Dallas Arts District was being built. So all of the attention and the resources was being directed to that area. I distinctly remember courting a major philanthropic organization, local organization. They said, okay, you have aspirations of renovating this building. When we see dirt moving, then we'll come back and help. So we got through the first phase, went back to them and they said, well, we normally come in, at the end. So consider us maybe for the lighting and sound and equipment and, staging. Okay, all right, fine. So we got to that stage and we went back to them and said, okay, we're here, we're at this stage. And they said, well, we're going to support the Dallas Arts District. I was incredibly good at. And so again, that's what led. I'm so grateful for Michael Kaiser and that art symposium because I was just green. I was finding my way. I had never, um, owned a building, owned a property before. And in that moment, I felt like it was such a curse to have that was all the money in the world. We had a construction loan. We were over $1 million in debt. It was all the money in the world to me. I didn't know where to go. And the other thing is, people were laughing at us. I'm a transplant. I'm not from Dallas. I didn't go to SMU. I don't have the Booker T connections. I didn't have community here. I left the community in Atlanta. And so, people were laughing at us when we said, we're going to renovate this building, we're going to do all of these performances. I mean, we essentially, what I learned is that, we did what a lot of people tried to do, are trying to do. And so we had to prove ourselves. And I feel like once we were able to, sustain ourselves for 10 years, um, and certainly, I don't think that it really changed until after we paid off the construction loan debt. So during COVID, we were able to receive the Save Our Stages legislation grant. And that allowed us to pay off the building. We didn't get the respect, and that was just a few years ago, but we didn't get the respect and the resources that we need. Even media, like it was so hard to get, the local media to come out and review any of our performances. It was, oh my God, it was so incredibly difficult. I think my faith got me through. I know for sure my faith got me through. I grew up in Albany, Georgia, in the Black Baptist Church. And when I tell you that I had to call on my faith during that time, that's really what helped me keep my sanity. That and a group of, again, I don't want to discount the importance of having board members who will roll up their sleeves and get in the trenches with you, right? People like Emma Rogers, who lended her name to us. Emma Rogers owned Black Images Books in Wynwood Village for 30 years. So she was a business owner. As a Black woman, she knew everything. And so having, people like Emma Rogers to kind of counsel me and be in my corner meant anything. Meant everything. The other thing is, there were people like um, Ann Williams and Sonetta Drew at Dallas Black Dance Theater. Those women have kept those doors open for what, almost 50 years. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, again, representation matters. I'm thinking if
Yes.
they can do it, I can do it, right? I'll tell you something else that happened that I don't always talk about. And that is in 2008, Barack Obama was elected as president, and I will
Mhm.
refuse to close those doors, the doors of the theater, under the first Black president administration.
That was the fuel, wasn't it?
That was the fuel. That was seriously, yeah, that was fuel. So that's one of the things that kept me up at night. I'm like, nope, not gonna. I don't care what I have to do. Not gonna
Not,
close these doors
not
under.
on my watch, huh?
Not on my watch.
I want to call out that you talked about the board members rolling their sleeves up, and you talked about varying other people, the women that you referred to that had a station in Dallas, agency in Dallas. You're just, we think of community as something, in particular, like here it is, it's a community, but I like to drive home that community shows up in so many ways.
Mm.
Your board is your community. That is one of your communities.
Oh, for
Those
sure.
women that came to bat for you, maybe it's just a 3 or 4 person community, but that's still a community. Community happens anytime there are two or more.
That's right. And it wasn't a whole lot of people. Trust me, it was not a whole lot of people. I mean, there were so many forces against us. I wasn't from Dallas. I didn't have a connection. I don't have a money tree in my backyard. I didn't have the resources. And I'd never done this before. The other thing is, so very careful to tell people what they can't do because you don't know you don't know the principles and powers that we can't see that are working on behalf of people. I think one of the reasons why the theater is so successful is because I did surrender my will to the will of community. So I'm very careful to tell people, oh no, you can't do that. Nobody's ever done. You don't know. You don't know.
Well, I can also tell you that you have found a way to remain humble in spite of all of your success, and that plays a big role in what you're describing right there. Humility goes a long, long way. A lot of times when people find that level of success, they forget about humility and they kind of get a big head and they start throwing weight around, and
Yeah.
that always works against us.
Yeah, it does. It does. I don't take any of this for granted because I know it could all be gone in a blink of an eye also. So yeah, I don't take it for granted.
I know
Ty,
that,
what have you got?
well, I just want to call back to how it is. I know that we mentioned that we had seen a production, Fanny, before.
Hmm.
And it goes back to what you were saying about how representation matters. And there's definitely a strong education component. And I know that we had the pleasure of seeing um, a I believe it was a play by a young man who um, grew up in Dallas and
Patches.
Austin.
Yes,
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
yes. Um, Again, that really spoke to us in ways because, again, representation. That's where else could you see such uh, a genuine and honest portrayal of the experience of what it is to grow up queer and having to be Black and navigate different ways that others might think that you have to be. And there's so much more than what was on the page or what was happening on the stage.
Hmm.
I loved being able to sit in that audience and see some aspects of my story. And I know that a lot of the things that you produce have that same kind of impact where there's so much more that happens. There's so much transformation that happens. Um, I'm so grateful that through your successes, you have seen the value in giving back in a way that is profound.
Thank you for that, Dwight. Thank you so much for that. So I met Joe Anderson Jr. It's a young man who wrote Patches
Mm-hmm.
in Austin. I was invited to see that show at the Carver Museum. And it was during the pandemic when theaters were closing, like because audiences were not returning. But at that show, there was so many people in that audience that they had to bring in chairs. And I'm like,
Oh,
who, who, who is this guy? And then when he started talking about Oak Cliff and Bishop Arts, I'm like, wait a minute, you're from Dallas? you got to come to Dallas and do this show. And so I was so excited to be able to host, and he was happy to be able to come home and do that show. And again, that's the beauty of having autonomy, to tell those stories. I didn't have to go through any bureaucracy. I didn't have to, nobody had to vote on what shows, uh, whether or not we would bring that show to our stage. Like, I'm like, you're coming to Dallas and you're going to do that show home. And I was excited and very honored to have Joe tell his story. It was, you know, I mean, it was very, very moving.
You
So
know,
thank you so much for that.
I so relate to what you're saying because that's the way I won't speak for Dwight. He may feel this way as well, but that's the way I feel about what we're doing with this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We have full autonomy. We get to invite any guest we want and turn down anybody we don't want. And
Mm-hmm.
for us, it very much is about representation.
Mm-hmm.
In,
Yeah.
in every way of as many marginalized communities as we can touch.
Mm-hmm.
We very much are, like you said, about people certainly are aware of the way that we're different from each other.
Mm-hmm.
We're about promoting looking at the ways that we are similar to each other,
Mm-hmm.
things we have in
Yeah,
common, because I believe that's what will heal our planet.
that's right. Neuroscience tells us that our brains prefer familiarity. And so we are intentional about making sure that that representation is on our stage.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Well, we're running close to being out of time, but I want to
Oh.
just touch briefly on one other thing that I want to know about.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to hear about how it all began. I mean, like way back there, not the whiz, but the little girl, Teresa.
Yeah.
What was the first thing that you can remember that had to do with creativity that sparked your inspiration?
Oh my gosh, this is such a great question. So I remember I grew up in Albany, Georgia, and I distinctly remember like as a child, I was probably in grade school, like holding uh, skits on the side of my cousin's house and telling my brothers, my sister, and my cousins, okay, you say this part and you say that part. And it interestingly enough, I mean, it has, when I look back, like it's always been there, right? I feel like this is like divine intervention, and I'm so walking in my purpose because even when I was, a grade school student, I was performing and producing and um, creating community. Um, so,
It's what
Maddox,
you were
that's such
born
a
to do,
great
babe.
question.
It's what
I
you
don't
were
even,
born to do.
that is so great. I mean, you conjured up something that I had just completely forgot about. But even back then, yes,
You
on the
know,
side of my cousin's house.
when you told your story just now, it sparked a memory for me that I haven't thought about in decades. Decades.
Well, you,
And I
you got
won't
to
go into it
spill.
now, but
Yeah, you got
it'll
to
be
share
part
it.
of
You
a
have to
later
share
episode. But it was like, oh my gosh, I used to do something sort of similar. And
it. Yeah.
it's very funny. It's just very funny. Wow. I'm so glad I asked that. What a great story. Not only just for those that are listening, but it just sparked a really cool, warm memory for me. So thank you for that. Wow.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the question.
Absolutely. Well, before we wrap, we like to ask three rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Are you ready? Well, I'm going to ask one more question before we do rapid fire.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Given everything that you've been through and everything you've experienced, from the challenges to the success, What is some words of wisdom that you could share with our audience for those that may be in the early stages of their creative journey? That tough time when we're in the,
Yeah.
survival mode. What are your words of wisdom?
Oh gosh, I would say, the fact that we were persistent and that we were able to block out the noise. I mean, it was so hard to do, but I just encourage anybody who's trying to do anything that, and you're seeing obstacles, like just find a way to block out the noise. Because the longer you do it, and I really feel like there are no mistakes that all of your mistakes are ways for you to learn. It's a learning, it's a way for you to learn. So even when you make mistakes, even when there are things that you don't quite get right, that's the universe saying, okay, try another avenue.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. I needed to hear that right about now. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah,
Regardless of whether the audience gets it or not, I got it. Thank you.
yeah. I'm happy to
Awesome.
share.
Okay. Rapid fire question number one. What keeps you going during tough times? You may have already answered this, but we'll give you another stab at it.
hmm the reality is it's been hard for sure, but the reality is I really love this work. And the other thing that I was reading, I can't remember something the other day, and what I read was you can't serve the people if you don't love the people,
Oh,
right? So my love for
Wow.
people,
I
my
love
love, you can't, and I've learned that we've had so much turnover in our office from people who were opportunists and uh, just didn't, weren't there for the right reason. But what I know for sure is that when you love the people, you can serve the people much better. And that's what keeps me going. Like I knew when those seniors were not able to come to the theater after COVID that we were going to them, that we were not going to abandon them. That wasn't even a consideration.
girl, you get that you got a book in you, don't you?
a few.
Absolutely. What a beautiful answer. Okay. Who's one person you'd love to collaborate with?
Ooh, one person, only one? Oh,
Well, you get as many you want, but just we're just asking for you to name one that's
yeah,
kind of
just one person. Oh, I am going to Selma for oh, yes, okay. So I'm going to Selma for the 60th anniversary of uh the Selma March. And so I have been following Brian Stevenson's um trajectory with Equal Justice Initiative, and I'd love to work with him. So he was here in Dallas before he wrote his book. Um, and he was talking about the movie version of his story. And I said to him, I said, if the movie version doesn't work out, I have a stage for you. So I love to work with Brian Stevenson. I love to collaborate some way with Brian Stevenson. So I'm excited about that trip to Seoul. But the EGI is in Montgomery.
well, we will hold that in the light for you.
Thank you.
Okay, final question. If you could create anywhere in the world, where would you be?
Ooh, so I just got back from Costa Rica and I love, oh my God, the people, the culture, the land. And I think Costa Rica is high on that list But I also had a chance to go to Thailand in November. And again, um, I had a beautiful experience. But I know that there are a lot of Black expats in Costa Rica. So I'm going to say Costa Rica.
You know, I got to go to Costa Rica in 2014. I spent almost 10 days down there, and I absolutely loved it and would go back
It's
in a
magical.
heartbeat.
It's magical.
It is
That place is
magical
magical.
in
Yeah,
so many ways. I
in
agree
so many ways.
completely.
Yeah.
Teresa, this has just been a delight. Thank you so much. I just love digging in and hearing more. I mean, I felt like I knew you and was connected to you before, but even much more so now.
Well, before we completely close out, I would like to ask if there's anything that you would like to share with our listeners that we haven't had a chance to talk about today.
Good
Thank you,
call.
Dwight. Yes, we have an upcoming banned books festival. It was our it's a one act festival where we select a banned book and we commission eight playwrights or six playwrights this year to pen a one act play based on a book that has been banned. The book that we chose this year is Stamp from the Beginning by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. And so um, that one act festival happens on um, in that's what's upcoming. And so I'm sure we can include a link
We'll drop
in
some
the show
links in the show
notes.
notes.
For
Yeah,
Absolutely.
sure.
So search the show notes
about
for
that.
all
And
of the
so I,
things that you have shared. So if you're
yeah,
listening, be sure you read the show notes.
yes, yes. I'm excited about that. Thank you so much, Dwight, for the question.
Absolutely. And this has been a pleasure. I know that we will certainly meet with you again soon.
Yes. Let's do lunch again off camera.
I would love that.
It's great.